Hey philosophers, in our last video we were just talking about Plato and Aristotle and some of the differences in how they viewed opinions and experiences. And recall, for Plato, he treated opinions and experiences as shadows of reality, but not the real thing. Just like any triangle you see is not the true perfection of a triangle and therefore isn't the way to know the true triangle itself. While for Aristotle, he's demanding that we dig into our experiences and opinions because they are a fundamental way in which reality will show up to us, right? And so both of them accept the fact that opinions are ultimately somehow partial and imperfect. But for Aristotle, the imperfection and the impartialness of our opinions means that we need to examine them carefully. And we realize that just as much as their imperfection might lead to concealing something, concealing the truth of things, they also, if we examine them carefully, can reveal. Right? And so just as opinions can conceal the world through their imperfections, they can be a way to get to the truth of things. And so what do we mean here? What do we really mean? Well, here we're going to look at a couple of texts to help us understand ultimately Aristotle's dialectical method, right? And Aristotle's dialectical method is going to be a method where he is going to resolve the apparent contradictions in appearances. So here, this is a quick text from the Topics, right? And in the Topics, Aristotle says in Book 1, Chapter 1, he says that reasoning, on the other hand, is dialectical if it reasons from opinions that are generally accepted, right? And so, okay, we have some kind of opinions, and then there's a subclass of opinions that are generally accepted. The Greek word for opinions in general is doxa, and by generally accepted opinions, the Greek word is endoxa. It's a special subclass. And Aristotle is going to have us focus on endoxa, on these generally accepted opinions. Well, what does he mean by them? Well, we can go down a little bit further and we'll see here. Say, on the other hand, those opinions are generally accepted by everyone or by the majority or by the philosophers, all of them the majority, the most notable, the most illustrious of them. For Aristotle, we need to take very seriously the views that are extraordinarily, on one hand, they could be extraordinarily common views, right? So if everyone says, almost some cliches can be like this, like ignorance is bliss. Why would so many people say that and perhaps even think that? That common, even that cliched kind of statement carries some truth to it, right? Or something else that we should consider are things that are spoken by the wise. If someone very, very intelligent presents a particular opinion, you know you need to take it more seriously than just the opinions of just about anyone. For Aristotle, either one of these two cases, looking at what people would say in common or the wise, the fundamental focus here is to figure out why they have that particular view, right? Where does it come from? Opinions themselves, doxa, opinions are that's. What do I mean by that? I mean that that says that's, right? And that's a weird word. But we always know that someone has a particular opinion. It's undeniable that someone thinks something that they think. It's just like when we were talking about whether opinions can be wrong. Do I have that here? Somewhere around here. Can an opinion be wrong? We talked about how it's a fact that someone says they think what they think, and we'll take people at their word. If they say they think something, we'll go with that, and that is a fact, right? It cannot be denied that someone had that experience or that someone has that opinion. But for us, there's a deeper question of why. What was the reason that someone has that opinion? Or what's the reason that that experience happened? And it's the reason why something occurs reveals to us the way in which something is actually a fact. And here's the idea. When I say that an opinion is a fact, what I mean is it's a fact that someone said something. It's not necessarily a fact in terms of the proposition being true. Recall how we, once again, talked about how statements could really be about the speaker who's speaking the thing, or they could be a proposition about the world itself. When I say that an opinion is a fact, I mean it is a fact that a speaker spoke those words and has that particular viewpoint, but the proposition about which they spoke, we're going to say in the factuality of them presenting this viewpoint, there's something about the world that is revealed, right? Now, and it's up for us to really dig in to try to figure out what's true and what's not true within the factual things in front of us, within the fact that someone spoke what they spoke, right? And for Plato, I don't mean Plato, I mean Aristotle, we'll see here a couple of interesting statements where he talks about this kind of dialectical method, right? Where we said dialect is this method of resolving the apparent contradictions that we encounter in the appearances of things. If we open up our books to Book 7, Chapter 1. Now, as I'm getting there, just as an aside, reading Aristotle can be tough because some of the most important things he says aren't placed in a logical place in the text. And towards the end of chapter 1 in book 7, Aristotle has this important statement about his method, right? So let's read this together. He says, as in the other cases, we must set out the appearances. Now, saying the word appearances is important to us. By appearances, remember, and we had it written down on the paper, appearances include both our own experiences and the opinions people have. And for him, Aristotle will take the way things appear, the experiences we have personally and the opinions other people give, will take them as facts that need to be dealt with, right? All right, so and then first of all, so to continue, he says, we must set out the appearances and first of all, go through the puzzles. Now, a puzzle is a kind of impasse that occurs through a kind of contradiction that we see in the facts. Right? It is a fact that one person thinks that you should be able to defend yourself at any cost. If someone attacks you and your family, you should be able to do whatever you want. There's other people who believe that very much against gun control and could say that no one has the right to have a weapon that could kill another being, right? And so we have these apparent differences in facts. Different people have these different kind of views. It's a puzzle for us that these two opposing views can contradict. For Aristotle, he says that this is Irwin's way of translating really what is an impasse. And if you remember in Greek, what was an impasse? Impasse was aporia. Yes, remember Plato talked about aporia, and he would say when you go through the Socratic method, you would be challenged in your viewpoints, and you would end in all these contradictions and realize you don't necessarily know what you think you know. But the whole point was to show that you don't have a definition and you are ignorant, and until you know the definition, you know nothing. Aristotle will also begin with this kind of aporia, this puzzle. But how does he deal with it? He doesn't say that we need to somehow get to the forms. He actually digs into it in a more practical way in saying how we need to examine the facts or the appearances, the experiences people have. He says, in this way, we must prove the common beliefs about these ways of being affected. Ideally, all the common beliefs, but if not all, most of them and the most important. Now, it's weird to say, what does he mean by prove the common beliefs? Prove the common beliefs. To prove the common belief, he means that you are going to be able to explain why someone thinks what they do. To be able to state why someone has a particular common opinion or has a particular unique opinion or whatever. This is what we mean to prove the belief, right? To see why it occurred. And so Aristotle will say, ideally, all the common beliefs, if not all, most of them, and the most important. Here he's referring to endoxa again, right? For if the objections are solved and the common beliefs are left, it will be an adequate proof, right? So he says, if the objections are solved, that means if we can figure out why there seemed to be an impasse, right? And if the common beliefs are left, if we still have the factuality of people saying what they said, he says, then we will have an adequate proof. Right? So for Aristotle to solve the objections, right, he's going to try to figure out why there were apparent contradictions. Now, when we say apparent contradictions, what Aristotle firmly believes that truth cannot contradict truth, right? That if something is true, it cannot go against something else that is in fact true. That all truth would be coherent, right? That if it's true, Well, you get the idea. And so we need to work out the apparent problems and the kinds of things that people claim. So, right, if someone claims that they have a right to own a gun, and another person claims they have a right to freedom from death, right? They're both right,